You know, Dagan, I want to get back to what we began with. An appalling moment for the United States media that was not lost upon any of us to immediately spew pro-terrorist talking points across outlets, across the major wire of the United States, blaming the hospital attack like that, knee-jerk reaction, blaming it on Israel. Take a look at the New York Times. They're called the Gray Lady, right? The most esteemed newspaper in our country. Well, here's what they did. This is moments after that happened. Israeli strike kills hundreds in hospital, Palestinians say. No, Hamas said that. Hamas is a terrorist organization. Well, then they realized, oh, maybe we should back up. At least 500 dead in strike. Notice the word strike. On Gaza hospital, Palestinians say, before finally landing at least 500 dead in blast at Gaza hospital, Palestinians say. We now know it was Islamic Jihad, but this is what I'm talking about. Watching and waiting for the media to flip the script and turn it right back on Israel. They were proven wrong by our own president.
This is more than 2 hours later, we should point out, in the first mention to the last mention that you're pinpointing. It's more than 2.5 hours later that they finally say the Israeli military said just a few things. Palestinians say, which you saw in other instances, that's purposeful. It's intentionally bearing the fact that they knowingly were regurgitating Hamas terrorist propaganda. Again, quoting terrorists rather than just waiting. Why should you even just say there's been an explosion at a hospital in Gaza, full stop? Because for a number of reasons that even most recently, going back to 2014, the last time Israel had boots on the ground in Gaza, it was widely reported that Hamas stores weapons inside hospitals and schools, that these missiles misfire by Hamas 30 to 40% of the time because they're made in part from old water pipes. So, and maybe have a soul and a brain and don't regurgitate terrorist propaganda. But the other thing is, why did they all pounce on this like they did? Because their bias betrays them. They want it to be true because underneath they are on the side of Hamas. These are journalists, and even though we shouldn't call them that, who are anti-Israel and anti-Semitic because they were educated in the very colleges we'll be talking about later in the show.
And no doubt. And this comes as the Israeli Defense Forces are pushing back against Hamas's allegations, their propaganda, and blasting the media for their coverage of the deadly hospital explosion in Gaza, as they should, accusing the press of rushing to judgment before all of the facts were known. IDF spokesperson Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner challenged CNN on their coverage earlier today. Watch this moment.
If you're asking for proof, you don't really want the proof. You just want to make sure you have a story. And unfortunately, there has been so much premature.
Hang on, I don't want you to suggest. Hang on, Peter. That is unfair. I do not want you to suggest that we are not seeking the truth. Peter Lerner, we are trying to seek the proof, and that was the question that I asked you, and you have provided what you can at this point, and I appreciate that. But please don't suggest that we're not trying to identify the truth, because that is exactly what we are doing, sir.
Like you'll never be content with whatever I share, because you'll ask for more and more and more and more. When you can take what I say for face value, and as
Peter,
I said, you don't have to believe one word.
I am reporting what other people, what the Palestinians are asking for.
But it's not the Palestinians. You are parroting what Hamas is saying.
I'm going to leave it there. It's good to have you, Peter Lerner. It's good to have you, sir.
Has been manipulating you.
Understood.
What a moment. Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner joins us now. You know, Lieutenant Colonel, prior to that moment, you were asked for evidence. You gave evidence. You held up an Al Jazeera broadcast showing the trajectory of the rocket. You said IDF was not firing rockets at that time. I heard at least 3 pieces of evidence. So how frustrating is it to then have the media reiterate terrorist talking points before you're even able to give your evidence?
I mean, you've probably seen me on television. I'm usually very calm and collected. I try and keep a mild view. And I understand that you have a job to do, and I have a job to do. But I found it extremely frustrating that Hamas gets this platform, and I could not stop but thinking about an organization that butchers babies in their bedrooms, and then they get to say to the media, and it's just automatically accepted as fact. Hamas says, and as if it's enough that you attribute it to Hamas, and then it should be accepted or broadcasted, and that's why this morning I had that very exceptional exchange with CNN. I don't like. That's not me. That's not how I convey my messaging. I prefer to be very straightforward and factual, and less on the emotional side, because I do believe that people are interested in facts. But I just basically lost it this morning, and I'm sorry for that, because that's not what I want. I don't think it actually benefits any viewers to get mad over it, especially in my official role. This conflict is a conflict that in an environment that is saturated by media, and especially social media. Some of the news media are in an endless chase after what's happening on social media, and then trying to keep up with that. You can't compete with social media, and you guys need to know that you can't compete with social media. Therefore, if something comes out on social media, you have to be 100% certain that this actually happened, that you're not being manipulated, because there is so much fake news coming out. There is so much misinformation and disinformation that it undermines what you're trying to do for your viewers. You are trying to give a good service to people who want to be informed. And when you fail like this, you're failing, first of all, you're failing your viewers, but you're failing the story. And I felt for the victims of Hamas's terrorist attack this morning. And that's why I was very, very direct. I felt the need to do that. I actually have a friend that sent me the caption of Fox News this morning, and I found that to be the most realistic conveying of what actually was happening as it was developing. So yes, you need to know that there is a responsibility in reporting. There is a responsibility when covering conflict, and in these crazy times, in times of conflict, we need to be responsible and stand up to that responsibility. So I'm thankful, and I appreciate the time. And I've been interviewed from Ireland today to the UK, the US, to Australia, all over the world. I've been presenting Israel's case in order to try to get this message across that Hamas cannot be trusted. This is an organization that will butcher babies in their bedrooms. They'll have no problem lying to you. And that we need to address Hamas's communication effort, their propaganda effort, as if we were listening to North Korea. There is no free voice there. You can't trust them. So please don't give them any credit more than I would say. Don't give them any credit. That's basically what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, if you burn babies alive, I think it's fair to say we should question your knee-jerk reaction and your so-called facts. Our own President Biden, was asked, what data do you have? How do you know that IDF wasn't behind this? He said data from my own Department of Defense. So I think that's established at this point. But Lieutenant Colonel, this is as much of a war of information. You see what happened just yesterday, the knee-jerk reaction of blaming IDF. How do you combat this as a potential ground invasion takes place? The knee-jerk reaction to embrace disinformation, because it took time for Israel to get the facts together. You got the facts, you got the images, you put it out. But not lost upon us was the fact that Hamas was out right away without the facts, putting out misinformation, blaming this on you, on IDF.
So I'm hoping that the world media are watching this event today, and I think that and we've seen over the course of the day a lot of toning down, and you showed the New York Times, and eventually. So I'm hoping that in the next, if there will be an event such as this in the next time, we will first of all be able to respond rapidly, but also that the reporters and the journalists, and they won't be after this crazed seek of attention to break the story first and then tell a story that is factually wrong, inaccurate, or misleading, we've seen over the course of the day, and I'm sure you've covered what's going on in Lebanon outside the U.S. Embassy. And we saw last night outside the Embassy of Israel in Jordan. Words have meaning. They create action. It is created, and this is what's happened. So we need to be, I would say, you have a responsibility. We have a responsibility. We have professional ethics. You have professional ethics. Let's live up to them. Let's not do the hyperbole. Let's not do the factually unclear stories. Let's make sure that terrorists are not abusing the access they have to you. And another colleague that I have that I work with sent me today, why aren't you inviting me to such and such an event with journalists? I get invited by Hamas to everything. And we have access, but we have limited access. Hamas just sends its propaganda out to everybody and gives them access, but it's not true access. It's all manipulation.
About it, Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner, thank you very much for your time.